Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Modern Mining. Today I have an exciting video. We're gonna be building a GPU mining rig in 2024, and guess what? It's profitable. Today's video, we're gonna take all these components and turn it into this, basically a profitable money-making machine. This rig is not for myself, it's for a client, but I figured it'd give you guys a great opportunity to learn how to build a mining rig if you're thinking about getting into it. So without further ado, let's take a look at the parts. All right, let's take a look at a breakdown of all the parts for today's build. So first off, the big thing is three 3060 Ti Zotac cards. These were used on eBay for about $270 a pop. Next up, we have a B250 BioStar motherboard. This with the CPU and RAM included. This was bought off eBay as well, and this was about $70. And then we have a HP server PSU, 750 watts. This came with the cables and the breakout board, and this was about $70 as well. And this PSU will do a lot of the heavy lifting in today's build. It will power all three of the graphics cards. By the way, I'll have links to all these materials down below if you guys would like to build your own rigs. We have a cheap SSD off of Amazon. This was $20. We'll be loading Hiveos onto that, which will be our operating system for the rig. And then our ATX power supply is an Aries Game. This was $45. This will power our motherboard as well as be basically the on and off switch for this rig. We're gonna connect that power supply to our server power supply so that when we flip the switch on that power supply, it automatically turns on our server PSU. So we don't need to mess with hitting that button every time. And then we got a 5-pack of risers. That was about $25 as well. As I mentioned, this is for a customer build, but I'm giving them enough supplies so that they can easily expand to 5 or 6 graphics cards without buying any extra hardware. So those are the main items in today's build. And then we also have our GPU frame that we built in the previous video, and this will cost $30. This is homemade out of wood. You could also buy a metal version for $40 off of eBay, but I prefer the wooden versions for customizability, and it's always fun to hang out in the garage and build something. So I prefer the wooden rigs, as I'm sure a lot of you guys know. So how I selected these specific parts was I basically tried to get the most budget rig possible. And that's where a lot of these part selections come into play. This Aries Game PSU, for example, is about the cheapest 500 watt power supply that you can get that's from a somewhat reputable brand. And since this isn't gonna be powering the graphics cards, it doesn't matter that this is only a bronze PSU. We don't really care. So let's get all this stuff unboxed and I'll show you how we're gonna set up this rig. First thing we'll do is likely screw in the motherboard into the frame itself, and then we'll start getting our power supplies placed into the frame and plugging our actual power supplies into the motherboard. If you buy a motherboard that doesn't already include the CPU and the GPU, then obviously first step would be applying your CPU and then applying your RAM as well. So we got our SSD unboxed. Later in this video, we'll have to flash that. But okay, let's grab our mining frame. So how I like to set up these rigs is I'll just screw my motherboard through the standoff holes onto the actual wood frame itself so that it's actually secure in the frame itself. So in this case, since the PCIe slots are on this right side of the board, I'm gonna bias the motherboard to this side, and then we'll have our ATX PSU and our server PSU right here, so it's easy to flip that switch on the ATX PSU to turn this rig on and off. So go ahead and grab a drill and some screws. These are self-tapping screws so you don't split any wood. And you don't have to fill every single motherboard hole. Generally, I'm only gonna fill 1 or 2. And you don't need to tighten these super tight. Just enough to where they're in and they're holding the movement of the motherboard. Now let's add just 1 more of these. And you can always add a little bit more later, but you really don't need a ton. Boom, and just like that, this motherboard is now secured to our frame. So now we'll take our power supply, get that in there, and unwind all our cords. And there's a couple that we're gonna need here. So this SATA cord, that's the one that we're gonna plug into our SSD drive. I'm not gonna do that yet because I still need to flash this, but we'll set that one aside. And then the first one we need is our motherboard power cable. So we'll just take that and plug that into the 24-pin slot on the motherboard. That one always takes a little bit of force, so make sure that you get it in there good. The next one is our CPU power supply cord, and that will say CPU on it most of the time. And that goes right here. This cord is our Molex power supply cord, and this is what will power our server PSU so that this turns on when we turn on the main power supply. And this will just plug in right here. We won't do that just yet, but we'll set it aside similar to what we did with the SATA cord. And then the last cord that comes with this power supply is a PCIe, otherwise known as like a GPU power cord. And in this build, we're not going to be using this, but you could technically use this to power an additional graphics card, one being powered from your ATX PSU and the rest being powered from your server PSU. Okay, so now let's organize this a little bit and then we'll get our server PSU set up. I like to put these so that the power cord goes in the front and then your GPU cords go in right here. And that just goes right in here. And then I'll normally take this and loop it back behind so that it can plug into the wall. Next thing we'll do is we'll grab that Molex power supply cable and we'll get it unwound from the rest of them. And we'll plug in our furthest Molex cord right here into our server PSU. Just like that. Each of these power supply cables is going to have one 6-pin end and then one 6+2 pin end. The 6-pin is what goes into the actual power supply itself. So we'll plug in, we're gonna need 6 of these cables plugged in because each graphics card is gonna take one power cable and then each riser is gonna take one power cable as well. So let's go ahead and plug in 6 of these cables. Let's grab our risers and we're gonna plug one cable into each riser. Okay. And then we're gonna go ahead and take our USBs, get these unwound, and then plug those into our risers as well. And let me know, guys, would you build this rig with any other parts? I spent a good amount of time researching these parts to get this customer the best bang for his buck. And I'd like to know if you guys would build this any different way. In the past, I know I had mentioned using Dell Optiplex motherboards, but really, this is such a good deal. The B250 for 70 bucks, including the CPU and the RAM, that's hard to beat. So let me know if you guys would do that any different way than I did. We'll worry about cleaning this up in a little bit, but let's go ahead and put our graphics cards on our risers and then we can screw everything down and then do a little bit of cable managing so that doesn't look so horrendous. So we'll grab our screws and screwdriver. We need 3 screws. Take our GPUs and one at a time we'll stick these on the risers. You want to push this little lock back and then you should be able to get the GPU in there. I'm gonna space these out just to the maximum right now because this is only gonna be a 3-card rig. Might as well give them as much space to breathe as they need. I mentioned this before, but you want to make sure that the exhaust of the GPU is not blocked by the actual support beam itself. So we'll move that just a tad bit over and screw that one in. It's starting to look a bit like a GPU mining rig. Messy cables and everything. All right, now we need to actually plug our GPUs in. So take your 8-pin, your 6+2, just plug that into the GPUs. The next step is to put our little PCIe risers onto the USB cables from our risers themselves. So we'll go ahead and stick all of those on, and then you can go ahead and plug them into your motherboard. Be careful how you plug them in, because if you plug it in backwards, you could fry the slot on your motherboard. So you want to make sure you double check that. The part with no contacts on it does not go in the slots at all, so don't put that part in there. It doesn't really matter what order or what slots you put these on the board. It just determines what order they pop up in Hiveos, but especially for a new build like this, that's not something you need to worry about. Then we need to plug in our power cable for our ATX PSU. And then we're getting close to being able to boot this bad boy up. This rig will need 2 outlets, obviously for the 2 PSUs, but it'll be all in the same circuit. And I told this client, just make sure you stay under 1440 watts on a 15 amp home circuit. If you're gonna be running it 24/7, you only want to utilize 80% of the electricity rating of that circuit. So if you got other stuff on the circuit, then obviously you need to take that into account. You don't want to plug this into a circuit that like your microwave's on, because then you're going to trip the breaker. Or in my case, my wife's hair dryer used to be on the same circuit, and every time she turned her hair dryer on, it flipped the breaker. So definitely make sure you figure out which outlets go to which circuits. Okay, the next step here is I'm gonna go upstairs and flash Hiveos onto this drive so that whenever you plug this rig in, it's ready to run. If you don't know how to do that, check out this video. I just released a whole 30-minute full software guide to how to GPU mine. It'll show you how to set up Hiveos, how to set up your wallets, how to figure out which pool to mine on. It's got everything. So if you have any software questions, check out this video. I'll be right back once this is flashed. Today's video sponsor is myself, while I wait for some other sponsors to contact me. If you guys want to support the channel in any way at all, check out my channel membership below by hitting the join button. I've got the cheapest channel membership out of any crypto YouTuber that I've seen. It's only $2.99. You get sweet GPU badges that go next to all your comments, and I reply to every channel member's comments, every single comment. And you also get access to the Modern Mining Club official Discord. There's not a ton of people in there yet, but there's a few of us who are active, and we're trying to get it filled up with a bunch of people, share rig pics, do all that kind of stuff. So if you want to join, consider it. It's about the cheapest membership you'll find. And with that, let's continue on getting this built. All right, we got our SSD flashed. We just need to plug it in with our SATA cable right here. And also you need one of these SATA cables to go into your board in these slots. So let me plug those in real quick. That's everything plugged in. I'm gonna carry this out to the garage, and we'll plug in our Ethernet cable, and we'll give this guy a boot and change a couple settings in the BIOS, and then we'll see if we can get it to boot into Hiveos. Okay, so we've got both of our power supplies plugged in, and then I've ran a Ethernet cable, hard to see, but right there, a USB for a keyboard right there, and then our monitor cable. This board takes a DVI cable. So here's the setup. Let's see if she boots. This should turn on this PSU and the server PSU, so flip it on. There it goes with a little delay. Our server PSU's on. The graphics cards are all spinning. Motherboard fan spinning. Gonna spam this delete key. That's weird. The monitor's upside down. I think I have it rotated. Let's get into the BIOS and then I'll adjust that and show you guys what to change. Okay, so I haven't used that monitor since I attached it to the stand, and it looks like I attached it upside down. So I've just laid it on its side for now. Let's turn this power supply back on and we'll spam that delete key to get into the BIOS, and we'll check a couple settings. It looks like it already booted into Hiveos, but we'll go ahead and change. I'll show you a couple things in case you might need to change them. Okay, on this board, you want to go down to advanced and ACPI settings, and you want to find this restore AC power loss, and you want to make sure that that is on. And what that does is if the power ever goes out, then it just boots your rig back up as soon as it gets power back. It also allows us to just flip that switch on the ATX power supply, and as soon as we flip that switch, it'll boot up the whole rig. You don't actually have to hit a power button on the rig itself. So that's the main setting. And then in chipset, you want to enable mining mode, and that's specific to this BioStar B250 board. If you're using a generic B450 like gaming motherboard, there's a few other things you might have to change, like changing the PCI Gen to Gen 2 and enabling 4G decoding, items like that. But there's a lot of videos for each specific motherboard, so I won't cover all that in this video. But that all looks good, so we'll hit F10 to save, and then we'll go ahead and boot into Hiveos, and let's see if everything looks good. All right, made it into Hiveos. Now let's see if we can see our 3 GPUs here. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this off. Hiveos. Uh-oh, loading drivers for 2 GPUs. So it looks like it's not picking up one of them. Yep, it's only seeing 2 GPUs. So let's do a little bit of troubleshooting here. We'll make sure all our risers are plugged in. They are all spinning, which means that they're all 3 getting power, but not all 3 are actually showing up. So let's check all our connections and I'll be right back. So when I troubleshoot things like this, I went ahead and just unplugged one of the risers, and let's boot it up. And if we still see 2 cards, then we'll know that the one we unplugged is the one that's having the issue. So I'll wait and see that boot up and I'll jump back in. Okay, so when that booted up, it only said 1 GPU. So we know that this one is working fine. And if we follow this cable, this is going to the middle GPU. So we know that one works fine. Let's try this one now. Make sure you don't put that on anything conducting. I normally just stick it on the wood, and then let's boot it back up again. And let's see if we get 2 GPUs showing up again. And if we do, then that one's bad. And what that normally means is just the riser itself is faulty. Even though right now all of them are showing lights, it could still be that the riser itself is not faulty. I will try to reattach all the cables and everything before I throw out the riser, but this is just narrowing down the issue. Okay, so you can see there, 2 GPUs. So the one we unplugged, which is this card on the left, that is the one that's not working. So let me mess around with some stuff and I'll let you guys know what the problem was. All 3 are showing up now. All I ended up doing was moving that out of the main slot and into one of these other slots. You may have to adjust some BIOS settings to get the main slot working, but there's still 7 slots of the smaller one, so I'm gonna leave it for now. But we now have our rig up and running. Let's hop into Hiveos, and I'm gonna put in the overclocks and get this thing hashing away. All right, guys, right here we have our workstation rig. So if I go in here, I can see our 3 Zotac 3060 Ti's. And I want to make a quick flight sheet for Alephium on these. That's what I'm currently mining. I'm not doing the dual mining while profits are so low because I don't want to be paying $15 a day in power for $3 profit. So I'm just sticking to Alephium on its own, to get as many Alephium as I can before Asics come out. But let's go in here and quickly set this flight sheet. So we'll go in here and we'll go to flight sheets, and we will create a new one, and we're going to name it Alf Wallet. That's going to be that one. Pool Hero Miners. If you have any questions on any of this stuff, check out my full mining software guide. That's going to be the best way to learn all of this. So we'll name this client rig Alf, and we'll create that flight sheet. And then we need to get our overclocks. So if you go to hashrate.no, go to GPUs, and then type in the 3060 Ti. And let's scroll down until we find Alephium right here. And we can see our overclocks are right here. And they unfortunately don't have them for Regal Miner. So let me just try Pyrin real quick, because they do have those and they're very similar. So you'll just copy right here the Regal Miner overclocks, and we'll go back into our flight sheet we made, edit, set up miner config. We'll put in our overclocks right here. And I know that for core clock, I want this closer to 290 for the best power efficiency. And then we can hit update, and then we'll click on our worker, flight sheet, and apply that flight sheet. And let's start seeing this thing mine and see what our power looks like, and compare these Zotac cards to some of my other 3060 Ti cards. I quickly tested these when I got them in from eBay to make sure they all worked properly, and it looked like they were actually going to be way more power efficient than some of my other cards. So I'm curious to see if that holds up. So refresh this page. Looks like we're getting 1.132 at about 70 watts on all three cards. So they are up and mining now. And quickly for comparison, we'll check this rig. And you can see that a lot of these 3060 Ti's are 79, 74, 80, 75, 79. And these are actually downclocked, so they're actually getting less hash rate too. So these Zotac cards are getting more hash rate for less watts than some of my other cards. So overall, a good buy. And let's quickly take a look at the profitability of this rig. I know that's what a lot of people like to know. So rough cost, I haven't done the calculations yet, but I think it's around $1,100 total. If we put in, let's do 10-cent kilowatt hour power and calculate with three 3060 Ti's, you can see we're making about 87 cents a day in profit. And that seems a little low, but if you would have checked this last week, that was at $1.50 for three 3060 Ti. So these profit numbers, they go all over the place. And before people say that's not worth it, let's take into account a couple factors. So let's say that's $1 a day profit, $1,100. That's 1,100 days to make your profit back. But if you hold all your coins, those coins double. That becomes 550 days for your return on investment. And now let's say profitability doubles like it was a couple weeks ago. That takes your 550 day ROI period down to 275 days. And that means this rig is breaking even basically within 1 year. And you still have all the hardware that you can sell. So that's the thought process behind GPU mining. I hope you guys like this video. If you have any questions, leave them down below. If you would have built this rig any differently, leave them down below. And I'll see you guys next time. I hope you enjoyed. Peace.